Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in the West Midlands and 105.1 for our listeners are tuned into us in Milton Keynes and Luton. Welcome this evening to our Parenting Hour show. You're with me again for this hour. My name is Kathleen Roche-Nagi, and we have some really interesting guests this evening and a wonderful topic that should be on the top of our tongues for all of us at the moment as we're talking and thinking about the winter and how that affects us and our homes and our energy bills and how we get through not just this winter, but other winters and summers, and what we can do to save the environment, to be better people, inshallah, and to do what we are expected to do, inshallah, as Muslims. So I'd like to invite you to this evening show where I've got Joe. Welcome, Joe. I think listeners will know your voice very, very well, but probably we usually talk about midwifery and babies when you come on in the past. So,
thank you, Kathleen. That's lovely. Lovely to be welcome back again here. Thank you.
We've missed you, and it's lovely having you here indeed with us. It's so nice. And I think for the first time we have Cameron with us. Is that right, Cameron?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yes, my name's Cameron from the Bahu Trust, or also known as the Sultan Bahu Mosque in Balsall, Heath.
Well, we're going to ask you a little bit about yourselves and what you do and about this evening's show. So let us just put a title for this evening's show first before we go into talking a little bit about yourselves. How would you describe it best? Because it's such a big topic. I find it difficult to put it into one sentence or to put a title on it. What would you say to put a title on to tell our listeners, tune in here this evening?
Well, I've got one word actually we could use to introduce it, and it's a word that some people sort of feel is a bit of a technical word, but actually it's a word that can be applied in lots of different ways. And the word is retrofit. Retrofit. So it's a technical word in terms of retrofitting homes, making them insulated, making them more energy efficient, all that sort of thing. But it's also a word that sort of looks forwards and backwards. It looks back to times of better values, of values of valuing relationship, of valuing community, of valuing nice thick walls that are going to keep you cozy in your home, of those sorts of things. And it's looking forward to being fit for the future. So it's a forward and back looking sort of thing. And I think it can also be applied to how we think of ourselves as we are now in terms of retrofitting our hearts and minds as well as our houses. And I know the Iona community has been very much thinking in this way, different spiritual groups. And I'm really glad we've got Cameron here who's going to hopefully contextualize that for us with the Muslim community. So retrofit. So it's getting on top of that sort of word, and it's in the context of homes, but also hearts and minds.
I'm sorry, just to add to that, another simpler term to retrofit is upgrading your home, just making it better, improving it, so that the energy you're using is clean energy. And they say the best form of energy is the energy you don't use, which is one of the qualities of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is living simply and not using as many resources. And I know when we talk about upgrading, everybody wants in, everyone thinking, yes, I want some of that. So it's making improvements to your house to give you better mental and physical health, in essence, and to save you money.
Wow. Now, listeners, you have no excuse. You're saving money by listening to this show, as well as improving your house and improving yourself physically wise and mental health wise. Well, it's a win-win in every direction. So I think we've already hooked on our listeners to be actually involved in this evening's show. It is a pre-recorded show, listeners, but questions are taken and we will send them on to both Joe and Cameron. Indeed, all you need to do is ring in the studio 0121 772 8892, or you can email the studio at studio@unityfm.net, and we will pass on those questions, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions of how we can do this and what can we do to upgrade, to retrofit our homes, our environment, and save money and be better people, not just for the environment, but for ourselves, and be better Muslims, inshallah, also. So, Joe, I'm coming back to you first, because, you know, you're like one of our key, our people on this show, one of our stable, I say, foundations, our pillars here.
Oh.
Thank you so much. You've been for years now. I'm nearly coming up to 10 years doing this show, and we've had you many, many times over those years. However, listeners change, new listeners come on board, so people may not know who you are. So can you just introduce yourself and a bit about your background and your journey to this retrofit that we're going to be talking about today?
Yes, of course. So I've been a midwife for 30 years, and I've particularly been a midwife in the Balsall Heath part of Birmingham, B12. And over the last 10 or so years, I think my introduction to you, Kathleen, was coming on the programme to tell listeners all about home birth and the home birth team that we had at the Birmingham Women's Hospital, and still have, is still going strong, which is fantastic, which is such a pioneering thing. And in a way, this follows on from home birth, because I'm talking about homes ongoing. I'm still a midwife, but I'm sort of semi-retired now, and I've shifted to thinking of myself as a midwife ongoing, with my duty of care to the whole generation that I have been a midwife for, who are now sort of young adults, you know, into their adulthood, young people, this whole generation, who are facing a very, very uncertain future. And I feel that my duty of care continues, and I've sort of moved more into climate activism. I've been trying to identify where can I be most effective, most useful to really make the sort of changes that need to happen on scale. So I've been sitting in the road, actually. That's part of what I've been doing with some of the climate activists and civil resistance movements. But then I've come home now to Balsall Heath to be really working in this area, because my husband is an architect, and we live in the Zero Carbon House, which you can Google, Zero Carbon House Birmingham. It's one of the first homes retrofitted to zero carbon standard. We moved in here in 2009, and in fact our home is negative carbon, so we actually generate more power which we put out into the grid than we use, and actually it's built in terms of really, really well insulated, so we don't have any central heating. We don't need it, because the heat that we generate just by living in the home keeps us cozy and warm. And we've had this vision, particularly my husband John, Zero Carbon House, has had this vision that it shouldn't, of course, be just our home that's at this standard. And in fact, at the time when we built this house, the government did have a code for sustainable homes, which would have meant that all new homes were going to be built to the really high standard by 2016. But unfortunately, the succeeding government did away with that legislation. So we still have homes being built to really low level of energy efficiency, and not really up to what the scratch that we need. But the most minimal carbon and energy efficient home is an existing home. And you know, most of our housing stock, especially in this area of Balsall Heath where I've lived and worked, is our Victorian homes, which are beautiful, have beautiful brickwork, beautiful plaster work on the front, this, that, the other, but they're terribly cold and terribly leaky in terms of air tightness, very drafty, and that leads to problems with mold and with you know, not a healthy environment, especially for young ones. And I'm very, very conscious of poor little 2-year-old in Bradford, rather similar housing that we've had here in Balsall Heath, Awa Bishak, who has sadly died recently of mould in his home, which wasn't addressed properly, made safe. Our homes can kill us. Our homes can be toxic, and we need to do this essential work to make them safe and make them habitable and make them a nurturing place to live. So this is my midwifery continuing into this current project that I'm actually going door to door, knocking on doors of my neighbourhood, making that contact, actually re-meeting mothers who I've looked after, who's then a child is standing beside them, who's no longer, as I say, a child, towering over 30, 20 something year old, who I say, hi, I saw you when you were a little baby in arms. So this is what I'm doing at the moment. And I think that gives you a little bit of a summary.
It is indeed, and it's lovely that you're putting it into context, that you're really kind of giving birth in another way to homes now, which is often we call it the structure, because we've talked before about happy homes and making parents inside happy and raising happy children, but actually the physical bit, if those bricks and mortar and everything else that goes in that, if that's not a safe environment, how can we look after the parents inside it and the families inside it first? So we always talk about having good, strong foundations and starting there. So we really need to look at that as the physical science now, the really strong foundations, the bricks and mortar and everything else to make that home safe. And especially as you mentioned, that little baby that passed away, it just brings us to light how our homes can be dangerous. We often don't think of our homes as being dangerous like this, indeed, and people need to be aware of that. So that's a really great introduction, Jo, into and a lovely picture of your journey here, which is, I can see, is a continuation of your journey. Indeed, it's all fits in together. It's like jigsaw. All the pieces are fitting in well together. Lovely, mashallah. Cameron, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into this?
Thank you. I don't think I can beat Jo's journey. I mean, hers is a very beautiful journey. In fact, if I remember correctly, she was midwife to my wife, and we had our first son too. So we're all interconnected one way or the other. My own history is in the international development sector. I worked for Islamic charities, and long story short, in the line of my work, we were spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on water wells, for instance, in Africa and South Asia, only to find out a couple of years later, these wells are drying out. And when you research further, you come to realize that it's because of the mass deforestation taking place. And so it would just be like a wake-up call that the answer to a lot of the problems is the natural environment. You have to preserve it. It's same with people are struggling to grow crops because there's lack of biodiversity because of pesticides and all sorts. So that started my journey about taking the natural environment more serious. And so I started getting into it more and more. And because I'm born and bred in Balsall, Heath, I'm linked with the Sultan Bahu Mosque. It's the madrasa where I also studied at. So I started doing some environmental work at the mosque and thought, okay, I need to explore what Islam as a religion says about the environment and all the everything else that's associated with it. And I mean, it would be a surprise to some, not to others, but the Quran is inherently environmental. I would challenge anybody to open up any page in the Holy Quran and there'll be a reference to nature, the environment. And there were so many teachings in the Sunnah that were environmentally friendly. So we then, in a trustees meeting and in a management meeting, decided that we wanted to focus more on behavior change and start promoting protection for the environment, because it's not just about the environment, but it's also linked to social communities, whether it's air pollution or food issues. But more importantly, the behavior change is one thing. So we're working with our imams to not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk. We have various different campaigns like the plastic-free iftar campaigns. Our madrasa syllabus covers environmental topics. But more importantly, we're also involved in campaigning for climate justice and social justice, because the Quran instructs us to uphold justice. So Joe and yourself mentioned Awab Ishaq. They had complained to the council, to their landlords, and nobody, had they had somebody else backing them up? And we know that mosques, churches have clout. So we need to be able to use the positions we are to be able to engage with the policymakers, with the decision makers, to be able to break down the barriers for people to be able to thrive in their communities. So social justice, climate justice, all the changes are all interlinked, and that's where the mosque is trying to do some work.
Wonderful. And listeners, if you're tuned in this evening and some of what we're saying has touched you and you want to find out more, and please do tune in. But if you do want to find out more and have questions, the number again is 0121 772 8892. And if you can ring the studio manager, we can take questions and we will get back to you with your answers individually, indeed. So our listeners, of course, are not just Balsall Heath listeners, they're across the West Midlands. And, I know some of them are actually tuned in from Inspire FM, as we can't forget them down in Luton as well, because when I go down there, they recognize my voice. So I have to bring them in as well. So are we just talking about Balsall Heath here in what you're doing, or are we talking about something that's a little bit broader that other people can get involved with and should be looking at as well?
Yes, I think it's something that everybody needs to be looking at. Every home needs to have these measures taken to make them more energy efficient. We need to look at absolutely every home. So we're really targeting homes that are on the energy performance certificate. You get this energy performance certificate when you're selling, have to get one now when you're selling a home, and it rates your home in terms of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, a lot of our local homes are below D on that grading. And so we're really working hard to bring them up to at least a level C. And really, we should be bringing them up to a level A. In Europe, the homes are at that sort of level, not like our British homes, which are really, really bad. So it is something that applies for all. And of course, there's a big campaign, especially in the context of the cost of living crisis now that we're all facing, and identifying that we really need to move on as a whole world society from fossil fuels as fueling our energy to renewables, and we need the government to be taking a lead on this. So we need to do what we can at every level, at our own domestic level, at our neighborhood level, at our city level, at our nation level, and global level, really. And the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is one of the most outspoken and passionate advocates for what needs to be done. And if you want to just follow him on Twitter, his daily tweets are very, very powerful. So it's something that we all need to do, and it's just doing what we can with where we are, with what we can have and create. So we've gone after this funding. There are little pockets of funding that are available. We're making the most of what is coming to us, which is not really, not by any means enough, but we're just going to do what we can with what we've been able to tap into with funding that's coming from government through our council that we're using. And we're trying to meet in the middle. So we've got the sort of top-down aspect of things, but really from the community up also, so that we can make this funding that we are tapping into go as far as we can, and making it go to the people and the houses and the homes that need it the most. So we're doing stuff at a practical level. We've got this funding that's up to £10,000 of retrofit home energy efficiency measures that can be taken for homeowners and tenants of private landlords for their homes locally for us. It's called the Warmer Homes West Midlands grant, and it's being channeled through Civico and Act on Energy, and our local MEC trust are actually sort of being the agency that's processing applications. So there's that level of things. And then I want to just mention, and then I'll swap over because it's lovely to keep backwards and forwards the balance of voices on this programme. The Warm This Winter campaign, which is a national campaign. And there's going to be marches, I think, in Stoke and in London on the 3rd of December. And it's really a campaign about emergency support for householders, about upgrading homes, using the word that Cameron used, or retrofit homes, about cheap renewable energy and being free from expensive oil and gas. So if you Google Warm This Winter, and I'm hoping that we might be able to arrange a Warm This Winter march through Balsall Heath, maybe on the 3rd of December. I think that'd be fantastic, because we're very much bringing together East and West Balsall Heath across the board with all the different community organisations and groups that we're working with, and building this sense of agency from, you know, individuals and neighbourhood level.
And if I can just touch on the Balsall Heath aspect, because I think there's a really good case study of how communities are coming together. Myself and Joe were talking about this morning. If we were to look back a couple of years ago, even 1 year ago, retrofit or improving homes is not normally seen as the job of the community, or what's this got to do with the masjid, for instance. But because it's an issue of social justice and improving people's homes, especially people from deprived areas who don't have the capital or the money to be able to do this, what role does the masjid have to play in this? The mosque is at the center of everything in our communities. And this is a wonderful example of the faith places. Like, we've got the Clifton Road Mosque, which is a Shia mosque. You've got the Sultan Bahu Mosque, which is a Sunni mosque. You've got the churches on Edward Road. You've got local community centers. You've got architects, energy experts, midwives, all of us actually sitting together, discussing how do we do this, sharing good practices, ideas, and spreading it to the community around. There are grants available. Let's help you get those grants and retrofit and upgrade your house so you don't have to pay for it. And it's a really good example of people who don't come from that background or professional background coming together.
Right. It is lovely to see everybody coming together, and I think we need to know a little bit more about this now before we go into the break. We have a few minutes left, so we will come back to it after the break. But just to touch on it before we go into the break, because there's a cut-off date and time is racing. So tell us a little bit about what we need to do now.
Yes, so we're now we need, certainly in our area where this grant is available, and it's also in Tyseley and Acox Green wards that are covered as well as Balsall Heath. We need applications in, and we need them either in online or on paper format. And so a number of us are going door to door and have been doing over the last number of weeks, knocking doors, inviting people to complete the form. We need those forms handed in to MEC Trust on the corner of Court Road and Edward Road as soon as possible. So the date that has been put forward as the cutoff is the 30th of November, but I think realistically we need to think that really that's a little bit before that, maybe the 25th of November, because those have to be actually at the office at Act on Energy by the 30th. So we need those forms in as soon as possible. And I've been out this morning, going down some of the local roads, leaving forms with householders saying, please fill this in as soon as you can. They need, you know, the householders who are actually on the ownership of the house, both to sign if there are two of them, and hand it in as soon as possible. There may be other funding coming online and other projects, other further stuff, but at the moment, this is the one that we're going for.
This is the one. So if somebody's listening in and haven't received their form and think, wow, why haven't I got this before, but I want to know more about it, where do they go to get this form? And I know we've only about a minute before break to
well, if you just Google Warmer Homes West Midlands and then follow through the different links for the area. And it is a very postcode specific applied bit of funding, this, and we've lobbied hard, and that's partly where the community aspect has come in, that we've there is no, for this particular area, these particular postcodes, because the properties do so much need retrofit upgrade, there's no income restriction, there's no requirement to be on benefits. You just have to live in the postcode area and have a property that is below a level C on energy performance.
And how would they know they're below level C?
Well, I'd say just put in a form anyway, and then it can be seen. But basically, if your home is a bit drafty, a bit cold, put in your form. Definitely. And if it's worse than drafty and cold, just really go for it. Don't delay.
I think a lot of people listening in will recognize those words, cold, drafty, especially as the cold winter evenings are coming in. So listeners, get in your form, get online, get the form printed out, fill it in, or you can probably fill it in online and send it in, and then we can all try and see how we can make our homes better, indeed, be better prepared, not just for this winter, but for other winters as well. We're going to come back to Joe and Cameron after this commercial break. So please grab a pen and paper if you haven't done so already. We'll repeat everything that we've said after this commercial break again, so you can write down things, indeed, of how you can get this funds and more information about it, inshallah. Tune in to us, inshallah, soon again. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in the West Midlands and 105.1 to our Luton and Milton Keynes listeners. Welcome to you on Inspire FM as well. And although we're kind of focusing this evening talking about retrofit in the West Midlands and about how we can upgrade our homes to be better homes, to be more suitable for us to live day to day, but for generations to come also. I am sure there's similar schemes down in Luton and the other areas of the country. So please don't tune out, but tune in and think and look up what's available in my area so that I can do the best for my home, for my family, inshallah, and spread the message. We often talk about spreading the message here because we know that you may be listening driving home. Other people are not able to tune into this. So please put it on your chats, spread it out to your friends and your families. There is a timeline for this. The closing date is coming soon, and we're going to talk more about that, inshallah, in the second half. I'd like to welcome back Joe and Cameron. Welcome to this second part of our show. And we talked a lot in the first half about warmer homes and in the West Midlands. And you mentioned about going on the website, Joe, and downloading that form, and there's cash there available, which is amazing. That actually there is cash available for people, not usually cash available. Is it, you kind of mentioned it very briefly, it is for everybody. Let me clarify that again. You don't have to be in a certain income or produce welfare statements or documents. Is that correct?
That is correct. For the certain postcodes that our project is covering, you don't. In other areas, there is a means tested aspect to it that you need to have an income below 30-something thousand, I think. But for our area, there's absolutely no restriction. So that's been really brilliant that we've been able to negotiate that. So no need to be on benefits, no need to have to be means tested, just need to live in the area and have a house that needs work. And so what I'm saying to people when I'm going on the doorstep is saying, when we're filling in the form, really, we just need your details in the first instance to be able to pass on to the next agency, which is called Act on Energy, who are then, this is on the journey, there's a sort of journey line with this project. We'll get in touch with the householder to ask if they can do a detailed home survey in terms of the energy efficiency to identify what sort of measures can be taken that will be most effective to increase that home's energy efficiency and reduce the bills of that home most effectively. And then based on that survey, works would be recommended. And that then is passed on to the next agency, which is a Civico, who are going to be undertaking the works, who've been commissioned by the Birmingham City Council to do the project. And those sort of works are mainly going to be insulation, draft proofing, replacing windows where they're just got single glazing or they're ill-fitting or there's other sorts of problems with them. Those are the main measures. I mean, it would be lovely to be going along further to be able to fit air source heat pumps, solar panels, that sort of thing, and maybe that will come. But in the first instance, we're wanting to reduce the energy demand of the home, so that as a result of these measures being taken, you'll be able to really turn your boiler down, and you can keep warm and cozy in the home for longer and warmer through the winter. So yeah,
if there's no retrofitting scheme in your area, it's very important that you write to your council or you write to your MP to push for the government to put some funding, because at the moment what is happening is where our bills are being subsidized by the government to keep the bills lower than what they should be, that money is all going into the energy companies and to shareholders, and it's lining up their pockets and they're becoming richer. And what we want to do is be able to get that money to spend on our house, on our property, so that we don't have to use the energy in the first place. So it's about campaigning to be able to divert the funds into something more meaningful in the long term.
Absolutely. And I will just I flagged it in the first half, and I'll just mention it again now in this half. The Warm This Winter campaign. It's just, if you look it up, Warm This Winter, and it's looking to future winters as well. And it's about this emergency support for families, upgrading homes, going for really prioritizing cheap renewable energy and freeing ourselves from expensive oil and gas, which, like Kamran is saying, is the sort of growth, corruption, sort of exploitative philosophy that we've capitalist philosophy we've had for these last stretch, which really is so ruinous of families, of people, of communities. Yeah. So that's what we're going for. Warm this winter.
You're doing a lot, because it's not just doing our homes, but you're educating people and getting them to think more broadly and change their lifestyle, change their way of thinking, change their whole persona in ways. And I suppose this has been coming slowly for a long time, but it may be news to some of our Muslim communities. Although I think, Cameron, in the Bahu Trust, you have done a lot of work towards this around, especially from an Islamic point of view. Can you help us help our listeners seem to clarify some of their thinking, some of their questions are coming to mind now around that?
Yes, and I thought you'd ask that question, because changing culture and changing our habits is not easy, especially the way we consume things. But our planet, Mother Earth, is suffering because of our consumption. You know, Surah Rahman, for instance, advocates for enjoying the blessings. Which of the blessings of your Lord will you deny? But it also says, do not skimp the balance. You know, what you take with one hand, you give back with the other. And we have become a default nation of just consuming. It's very natural now for us. When we need something, we just order it off a certain online company, and it just turns up to our door. It's become second nature. But if we're talking about changing culture, if we look at the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his life was simple. It was modest. It was humble. He only ate what he needed to. He only used what he needed to. So even if we talk about energy, for instance, I mean, Rasulullah, there's a hadith in Sahih Bukhari which says a complete month would pass by during which he would not make a fire for cooking, and our food would only be dates and water unless we were given a present of some meat. So his own lifestyle was very, very humble. So the cultures change. We have to do, I believe it's part of our ibadah right now. It's part of our worship to be able to change things, because the planet Earth is an amana from God. It's the whole world is talking about this, you know, in COP26, 27, everybody has agreed now that climate change and the climate crisis is impacting us. It's going to hurt us really bad in the next, you know, a couple of decades. But what we can't agree to is what can we do about it, or what should we do? Now, the cliche answer is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's lifestyle. Let's become more simple and modest in our lifestyle. So the sunnah is to change for the better good. And we completely understand it's not easy for us to do that. And again, that is also a sunnah, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not change things overnight. He gradually brought people along with him and to do that. And I think that's where the masjid and other masajid need to play that role, is that we become part of the solution by not imposing our values or environmental behaviors. There has to be a mixture of legislation, of government support, of people's own will, and the theological support. You know, there has to be a spiritual transformation. You know, I'll give you an example. I'll give you, like now, for instance, just taking your car to the masjid. You know, we know there's plenty of research that children's lungs are damaged outside of schools because of the amount of air pollution that cars bring in. It's the same for the masjid. We come to the masjid to pray. We bring our cars. We do wudu, for instance, to clean our body and our soul. But we've also dirtied everybody's lungs by bringing a car in. So where do we sit with that spiritually? Yeah, and there's a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, you know, the person who walks the furthest to the masjid gets the most rewards. So we have to make the connections and allow people to make the changes in a way that's suitable and easy for them. Because if it's done in their way, it will be longer lasting than if it was imposed on them.
Definitely. I mean, you're tying up a lot of our conversations recently that we've had here on the program on Parenting Hour. We've talked about clean air. We've talked about all of that. We've talked about the zones outside the schools. We've had people encouraging people to take their bicycles out and go walking. So you're really just amplifying that discussion here again this evening, which is really good, because we said we'd come back and revisit that again with those guests. And it's important that our listeners keep hearing this, because I think sometimes they don't even think that what they're doing. They're actually jump into the car before even realizing it, because they've never maybe tried anything else. They've never walk to the mosque or even cycle to the mosque. I started cycling probably about a year ago now, or coming up to a year ago. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And it's not just good for you physically wise, but socially wise, emotionally wise, psychologically wise, spiritually wise, because if you're talking about spirituality, you're really in contact with nature, and you really appreciate every single tree and every single bird and the air that you're breathing. You're really appreciated when you're out in the open air. So our listeners are getting those messages out there, I hope, and changing this. It may take time, and it probably will take, again, as you say, you're talking about this over and over again, to help and encourage them to be more active and to be more responsible for the environment. We're on that journey now, and we're on this journey about our homes, which is something that they're not thinking of, but I just want to come back to that, because I know time races here, and people may not have heard us in the first part of the show about this opportunity now to have some money, some cash, to be able to do this in the West Midlands. So can we just revise that again before we go into anything else and talk about other things? So, but thank you for putting this in context, because I think we all need to know from an Islamic point of view and put this into context. Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing as Muslims here?
Yes, so this context that we've been talking about, which is beautiful. I love it that we're working together with. I mean, it's just such a wonderful collaboration that we have with Kamran and the Bahu Trust, and like he was saying, with the Al Abbas Centre and the Baptist Church and the Balsall Heath Church Centre, and in fact across Birmingham we've got this Footsteps, Faiths for a Low Carbon Future, which is a collaboration of lots of different faiths, and I think they're organising a Tread Lightly conference at the moment, which is about treading lightly on the earth, and each footstep, noticing what impact our steps take, and like Cameron's saying, if we can walk or if we can cycle, makes such a difference. But what we're talking about is retrofitting, and retrofitting our homes, our houses, where we live, the bricks and mortar, making them well insulated so that they're wrapped up cozy and there isn't leaky gaps between the bricks or between the border of the window with the brickwork, so that you can do this thermal imaging. You can see where the heat is escaping from homes if you do a set with a certain sort of camera. So we want homes that are not going to be leaky and drafty. We want to be able to insulate them. And I think one of the things that we're looking at doing with the Balsall Heath homes is insulating some walls on the inside, some walls, so internal wall insulation, some on the outside, external wall insulation. And where there is a cavity wall insulation. But most of the old homes that we're talking about here locally don't have cavity walls, so it's going to be internal or external. So all these things, and retrofitting our hearts and minds, like we've been talking about, the habits, how we live, and what our expectations are, tempering those to fit. I mean, I've often talked on this programme about my mum, who's now 95, and she's been such a trailblazer for me over my whole growing up, about living, about treading lightly, about saving water, about only if she's going to be cooking, she would be cooking a Sunday dinner and baking at the same time. So she'd use the heat of the oven all in one and not turn it on multiple times, but use it all in one, turning off the lights, putting on an extra jumper inside, maybe, so not having the expectation in the winter of just wearing a t-shirt when you're inside, but dressing appropriately for the season. That sort of thing. But so we're looking at how to be able to, as a neighbourhood, make our homes cozier. And in fact, one of the beautiful things about what we're doing is going door to door, as we are. I'm finding some of the most sort of enriching experiences I'm having of meeting people on doorsteps is in avenues, so off the main drag of the road, where people already have a sort of community, because when they open their front door, they meet their neighbour or see their neighbour in the garden opposite without a road between them. And those sorts of avenue arrangements of living are so beautiful, because there's a much more natural meeting and getting to know people, and maybe, sharing, if you've run out of sugar, you can say, can I borrow some sugar, or whatever it is that happens. And so actually I've really worked at signing up a whole little terrace of houses, because where we can wrap up and make cozy that whole terrace of houses as one, not just an individual house, but we keep each other warm through our bordering walls between us. So where we've got a terrace, or the whole terrace can keep each other warm if they're all wrapped up cozy. And in fact, the money goes further if we can retrofit a whole little terrace, because then there's savings that we can use to do more. So just bringing you up to date with the second half of the programme, what we're doing this in Balsall Heath, it's in Tyseley, it's in Acox Green, and across other areas of the West Midlands and in other parts of the country as well. There's lots of pockets of this happening, and we want all those pockets to join up so that it's a national thing across the board. And there's a campaigning aspect of what we're doing, such that we need this to happen on scale. And I've flagged up the Warm This Winter campaign as an example of something that we can get involved with.
Great. And you mentioned that people can just look it up and either do the form online or send it in, print it up. I presume they do it online, so they save paper rather than printing it off and doing it. But some people may not have those facilities or not be able to do it online, so they may have to print it off and hand do it. Do you have some papers somewhere, like if they go to the Bahu Trust, could they pick up a form?
Definitely. We've actually I've been on my bike all around the neighbourhood delivering batches of forms to the Bahu Trust, to the Al Abbas Centre, to the library, to the old print works, to the Baptist Church, to the Saheli Group hub, to all these different neighbourhood groups and organisations. So the Children's Centre that I've worked with historically, they've got a batch of forms. So just ask, say, have you got one of those forms? And if they haven't got one, then they'll get in touch with me and I'll cycle one round to you and we can fill it out on the doorstep.
Brilliant. And to do that, you can ring 0121 772 8892 and just leave a message with our studio manager and he will pass it on to Joe, who will cycle to your house in person. Wow. There's something you can't miss indeed. And I know she's a quick cycler as well. She's used to it for many years. When people ring her and say the baby's on the way, she's very used to getting up on her bike and doing that very quickly. So you will get the form and I'm sure assistance also if you need to fill it out and get it in. Is there a closing date for this?
Yes, we really want these forms in next week. We want them in next week. On the form that flyer we're putting out at the moment, it says the 30th of December, but we want it in before then. So really, when is it? Next week. This time next week, it's going to be the 25th of December. So by the end of next week, please. November,
yes. Great indeed. So we get them to you and get them to the different areas. And if they can't bring them back to it's bringing them back to the Children's Centre, is it?
It's bringing them back. Yeah, it can bring them back to where you got them from, but better. It's locally. It's MEC Trust, the Muslim Educational Consultative Committee. It's a trust that's been working very closely with the community on all sorts of different community issues for many years, and it's on the corner of Court Road and Edward Road in the heart of Balsall Heath, and you can drop it in there any day of the working week. I think it's 9 till 4.
I just, if I could ask your listeners to see retrofit as a form of Sadaqah Jariyah. Now, I know that's not most people wouldn't describe it as a form of Sadaqah Jariyah. The reason I say that is because fossil fuels is damaging the planet. It's killing people. It's causing climate change, which is killing people. So if we retrofit our homes to be more energy efficient and to use more renewable energy, it's energy which you've then saved and used for good purposes. It's not causing damage. So you'll get brownie points from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. So look at it in that way. Look at it from a spiritual perspective as well. And then for every goodness you do, Allah will reward you.
Of course.
Lovely.
Indeed. That is, you put it in a very loving way, Cameron, which is wonderful, and people can understand and know now the reason, I think, why we should be doing this. Just before we go over some tips and before the end of the show, there's a lot of offices and buildings as well in our area, Balsall Heath area, in different areas. Does this apply to them, or do they have a different scheme? Do you know?
I'm not aware at the moment of a scheme for them. This is about homes, but there needs to be schemes for every sort of building, and every building needs to be taking these measures. So I think it's just a case of finding out. I mean, I did hear about a new scheme that's got funding available called the Hug scheme. It's for people who don't have a boiler, whose houses are being heated by electricity. There's another scheme at the moment that's available. Again, Met Trust are promoting that. But they're very specific little pots of money, and we need just a big dedication of funds to this. I think it's just homes are such massive consumers of energy and emitters of carbon emissions. It is one of the worst and biggest sources of our current crisis. in terms of the rise in global temperature. I mean, we all experienced 40 degrees in the UK. And to say, you know, we're talking about warmer homes in the winter, we're also talking about cooler homes in the summer. So a house that's well insulated against the cold will also be well insulated against the heat. So I know that's the case for our zero carbon house, that we kept a reasonably stable temperature when the temperatures were soaring in the summer. And we're going to be looking at very, very hot summers as we go forward. And we're going to need that insulation and draft proofing on our homes to keep us cool as much as to keep us warm in the winter.
Definitely we are. And we're in the last minute of the show. Is there any quick tips, information you want to get across to revise what we've just said in the last minute?
I think that rather than listing off a whole list of to-dos, the best thing is to reflect on what you don't need to use. Like the best form of energy is the energy you don't use. You know, I go back to the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about simplicity and modesty. Do we always need to get into our car? Do we always need to plug in our devices? Do we always need the TV on? Do we need to wash our clothes every single day? So just reflect on our own and think, okay, what can I reduce? Like every time you reduce something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be happy with you and you'll be rewarded, because that reduction has an impact on human life and on biodiversity life. You know, and the biodiversity and plants and all these things constantly do dhikr and do dua for us. So we benefit from all of that. Jo?
Beautiful. I don't think I need to say any more. That's just really well put. Thank you.
Listeners, you heard it here. Please go look up what we've been talking about. Get your forms in next week, inshallah, and ask any questions that you need to ask by ringing the studio. Again, it's 0121 772 8892. Until next week, have a good week. Keep yourself safe. Keep your family safe, inshallah.
One thing I just realized, because we are pre-recording this program, when we're talking about next week, we mean this week.
This week. You heard it here, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, listeners.